I'm using collage. And then I'm also going to share some work. I'm a teaching artist currently, which I can get into more in a little bit. So I'd like to share a little bit of my students' artwork using collage. And then we can have, if you all like, a more informal question and answer, like discussion session at the end. Um, yeah, so it's probably be like a half hour or so, whatever is good for you and the class. And thank you for having me. It's really cool to meet people in Oklahoma. So I'm currently in New York. I'm from New York. So it's really exciting to just meet people. It's at least one good thing about the pandemic is that you get to meet people across the country. So I really appreciate that. So I'll go and get started and um, share my screen. Sorry, let me pull up the PowerPoint. Okay. So I think you can all see that. So yeah, I like to just say that I have training. I went to art school. I went to college. I went to Skidmore College and I studied art. And then I got a Master of Art, Fine Arts at Purchase College, SUNY here in New York. But I just want to say though that Mr. Gregory, who connected us, he made such an impact on me. I was in high school about 15 years ago, and he was my philosophy teacher and English teacher. But he had just such a great creative vision and like passion for the arts that really went beyond just the classroom and like really enriched my whole curriculum experience. I went to a small Catholic private school and it didn't have that much of a creative arts, any of the arts program, not just visual arts. Um, so with him, I did a outside. I did a class writing about art. It was a free arts program in New York City for teenagers in high school, where I went around and looked at art and wrote about it reflectively. And I also um, really, I would say one of my first collage experiences was I created a, I was a visual editor for a literary magazine with Mr. Gregory, and I created collages with photographs that I had taken and printed out. And it really has formed my path and work to this day. So I'm going to move ahead and just show you some images. So this is an example. And this is, yeah, this is on Instagram. I also have a website. I have my information at the end. And so I have a series and I have some hard copies here of these books where I'll take old books and upcycle them and work in kind of an intuitive way with collage. I'm really inspired by the Dada art movement, the cut up is about kind of free association and working and kind of like playing with order and meaning. William Burroughs also is a writer that plays with the cut up, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name, but Hannah Huck. She's a German collage artist, modern artist, and she also is a really profound collage artist. Sorry, I live near a train, so the train is going by. It's really loud. So this is another example from this series of work I've made recently, where I've taken the books with me and I put them out in nature because I find I guess I'm interested in exploring relationships, being one, the book being produced by people, and then I'm putting my meaning, my experience on the book, which I think is important as teachers with literacy, where everybody has their own meaning and communication that they bring to the table. So I guess with these books, I'm really kind of highlighting my experience and the experience of like my subjectivity imposed on, or like what I bring subjectively to the book. And with history, on a greater metaphor, history in general, how we all carry kind of meaning with history. And then putting them in nature is just kind of bizarre, but also kind of playful, thinking about how we have knowledge in order, but it's a different order in the natural world. And I just think they look kind of visually fun and outside. This one is a little graphic, so I apologize if so. But this was a book called A Day in the Life of America, and it was a photojournalist book I found out at Salvation Army, and I collaged the pages of the book, and I kind of found it as a way to kind of purge or cleanse American history. Again, this is my own personal subjective experience, but these photos were about our history, and I was just trying to kind of show the subjectivity and relativity of that. Um, these sculptures are a bit earlier. These were I created in undergrad in college, and I'll say here that so I've always done art, and I'll show you a few other photos, not just like collage and sculpture, but painting. I, as a kid, just always loved painting and drawing, and was really trained as a, and I still do some like traditional or observational realistic artwork. But when I was in college, I found I was taking all these really technical art classes, drawing still lives, color charts, very specific grids of color, and painting and drawing fruits and drapes and the figure. And I really value that. But on my own, I was collaging primarily with found objects, even three-dimensionally. And in my dorm room, when I was not in class, I was building this body of work as well, kind of outside of my studio art curriculum. And my senior year for my thesis, my teacher, a sculpture teacher, who also was was the only female sculpture teacher in the class, in the program of sculpture. The other sculptors were much more into like metal, bronze casting, and more like industrial, intense materials. But I really wanted to explore this type of working, and I did an independent study with her. Her name was Vicky Palermo, and she said, this is a tradition, it's called three-dimensional collage. So these are from that series. The frame is wood, and then I'm using mainly hot glue and then wire and string to just assemble in an organic, living way these post-consumer materials that I got mostly from either thrift stores or personal items I've had, or things people just gave to me. This is for my MFA, my master's program thesis, where I'm still using collage, but in a way where I wanted to have people walk through and interact with the work more. So you can walk through this doorway frame portal, and there's found material and paper glued onto the fabric. The fabric's all hand sewn, and I also painted it as well. So I'm combining I feel like there's a fine line, and I could talk about that more later, about assemblage and collage. Assemblage and bricolage is when you're working with post-consumer materials. This is just a kind of funny project. This is my partner. We're near this art residency here. I currently am in upstate New York, but I'm teaching remote in Brooklyn because the pandemic has really shifted things around. But we made a bat for the Halloween parade near our home, and it's like a vampire bat, and it's collage using fabric, so gluing. So not just paper. So I would say, I guess there's different definitions of collage, but I would say it's not just, I think you're all doing a digital collage later. It's just combining and juxtaposing images in kind of new ways. So this is with fabric and wire and found material, and we put it on top of our car and drove around. It was fun. This is just another example about collage can be clothing, it could be wearable. This is again with applique, hand sewing, paint, and sewing as well. Oh yeah, I said sewing, but yeah, the collage is the fabric. I did with my partner. So sometimes, and also I realized my background is from the series of kind of playing with the landscape, where you're seeing in a way with objects in it, to kind of just give it new associations. And it kind of reminds me of the series of work reminds me of how we look at something we're still carrying all our memories and all our experiences with us. Like if I'm looking at a landscape, I might be thinking about what I just looked at on my phone or what I'm gonna have for dinner, or you're bringing your like visual vocabulary, your visual experience to your outside world, and there's this back and forth relationship happening. This is a piece, I'm making a sculpture this summer with found materials at a sculpture show outdoors in New Paltz in upstate New York. And it kind of plays, so I was personally raised Catholic, and I was really inspired by these maternal Madonna figures. So I'm kind of taking that form, but then adding found nature materials. Stones and shells from the ocean, and then also painting with them as well. This is another piece. These are smaller in scale, and it's with found objects, but also digital photographs that I took hiking in the mountains, and added them in to the image, like a little nature box. And I still think about my experience with Mr. Gregory in high school and using photos that I took and collaging them. This is another same series of hiking. And this has a photo of plant material. I believe this is golden rod. And then I also have the actual plants, the goldenrod and white carnations, which are symbols of cleansing and purification, collaged in as well. And then I'm painting as well. This is another smaller work with a combination of paint, found materials, like recycled consumer materials, nature materials, and photographs to, again, bring all those different experiences we're having with the natural world, with the consumer world, for memories. And actually this, it might be hard to make out, but on top, the labyrinth, on like there's a circular thing. I'll go to the next slide. So that this labyrinth I created for art residency about environmental justice, where I designed with a collaborator like a walking like meditation labyrinth to give just a place for people to go and have a meditative, slowed experience in the woods. I took that image and I put it in this box too. So I like going back and forth and like generating imagery from sculpture, collage, and back and forth. These are just smaller examples, similar body of work, and a series, how they are individual pieces, but they also relate to each other as a whole. Likewise with these two. These are just detail shots. And this I also did at grad school, and I was exploring symbolism, and I found the mouth and teeth to be really loaded with different associations, personally and culturally, across cultures. So I just put these together because one is a sculpture with found materials, and the other one is a collage with my photos in there from actually a performance. I also do some performance and dance, but the collage really informs the sculpture. So again, I really like that feedback of like the artwork almost communicates visually with each other. And this is just another example from that series of work with collage of photos of myself, prints, woodcut printmaking, paint, and just sketches that I collaged too. So these were oil paintings I did in undergrad. And even though they're oil paintings on canvas, as I said, I was technically trained in painting. I'm using collage as my reference. So for these, I took photos of my friends of New York City and Italy, where I studied I studied abroad, very fortunately, and had funding. It was very lucky, very different than now, where we can't really travel. But I made a collage so I took the photos, I printed them out, and I cut them up, glue them together, a piece of paper, like not digitally. And then I had as references in my studio, I hung up the compositions, and then I made the paintings from the collage. So I feel like collage is really that kind of way where you're, again, that juxtaposition, I just feel like is really inspiring to me. I find it really powerful as an artist. And then I'm currently working on the zine about how to look closely and unlearn drawing. I just recently did a residency with Oxbow remote, and we made, these are in process, but these are pages and they'll be printed together as a book of text. But the book is about how we really need to kind of look closer at something, not at the ideal, but at like when, for example, if you think about an apple and you ask a kid to draw an apple, they might just make a red circle. They're not really seeing the apple, they're seeing their idea of the apple. So this is about how we really need to look closer to truly see. And sorry, so I just have a few more slides. Thank you all for listening. I know I'm talking a lot. This is just student work. So I'm a teaching artist, and I know you all are in an arts, you're sorry, not art, you're in an arts integration class, and you're in an education program. So I'm currently a teaching artist. So I do kind of like freelance residencies in Brooklyn, where I go to different public schools, elementary and middle, and teach art classes through a nonprofit, Brick Arts Media. They're a really fantastic organization. They do a ton of free programming for New York City. I recommend checking them out. They have exhibitions, they have a news station, they do media, they have this summer, they have a concert series, they do a lot for the community. And yeah, I just really admire them, and they get funding from federal, city council, and private loans. They did lose a bunch of funding from COVID, but unfortunately, but they're just a really great organization. So this is from a student show there 2 years ago. So the kids, the middle schoolers, they kind of like collaged on the wall. They cut out their silhouettes listening to music from the Harlem Renaissance, and I installed it. I taped them on the wall in the style of Kara Walker, and the jazz music from the Harlem Renaissance. This is a pre-K student I had at the Painted Cloud, another art school in Brooklyn. Really, and it was inspired by Joseph Cornell, who you might be familiar with. He's also, or was, a pretty well-known collage artist that made little boxes. And yeah, I think he's really wonderful. I think also the fact that a 3-year-old did this is pretty cool. This is elementary school. We had a visiting artist, Kristen Hasenfeld, come, and she does fiber art, but we did printmaking. The key there is like a monoprint where they had found objects and they dipped in the paint, and then they had sand and glue. They dipped the string in glue and added glitter. It was really messy. Did not like using glitter. And then we took the fabric and all these different things and glued them on this wood panel. Okay. This is just another example. This is 3rd and 5th graders. So this is an after-school art program, and they made puppets, and in the style of Justin Perkins, who's a puppeteer in Brooklyn. This is again before the pandemic. And we made like a galactic background with painting, and then we collaged on the background narratives about the puppets and the planets. We kind of did a prompt where they traveled to other worlds and to this like kind of whimsical environment. And it's another place. So I made a lesson with the books that I showed you, and the one on the left is middle school, and they did erasure, or I guess not technically erasure, but they did the circle. That's when you block it out. They did circle poetry, and they also added like burned pages. They did burning because it was outdoor, and dipping the books in paint, and then they glued other words. So it was like a combination of different uh, media. And the one on the right I love as well. This young boy, basically transformed the book into a bouquet and used uh, living plant material as his collage. And I think this is maybe my almost last slide. This was, I was teaching at Purchase College, basically as an adjunct there when I was getting my MFA. And my final project was to create a portrait using collage as reference. And the student took symbolism of birds and flowers from where she was from, and then did a drawing, as you see here, of them. This is just my website and Instagram if you want to learn more about what I do. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'll just quickly show you, and then we could open up for some questions. Oh, let me just stop my virtual background. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. So I just want to show you quickly, these books are really tactile. I took for this one, I'll just show you quickly, is I took a puzzle and I found on the side of a road a puzzle and glued the pages, these pieces together. So they're just more, they kind of become, what I like about these books is that they kind of become like a sculpture as well as a 2D book. So I'm going to leave it at that. I think I maybe talked for a bit, but yeah, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts about collage, or I'd love to hear more about all of you and your program. And oh, and also, sorry, just to add quickly, I'm also in an arts education program at Hofstra University to get a teaching certification to be a full-time public school teacher. I'm in the School of Education there. So I'm also learning about education right now. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Melinda or comments about her artwork? How you could apply this to your classroom?
I have one. Melinda, you seem really drawn to found objects, and I just kind of wanted to know if you would tell us a little more about that or what inspires you about that.
Yeah, I think I love found objects because I think art is something that should be accessible to anybody. And I think even now with the pandemic and a lot of kids don't have a studio or materials, it's really important to know and be empowered that you can do art anywhere with anything. So I think I like that as in terms of just having access to resources. And I think it's also important to look at objects in new ways and kind of challenge, like instead of being a passive consumer, to be more active in our experience.
Thank you.
I have something. I don't think I'm in the frame, but I was just gonna say, I really am inspired by the line work that you use and the way that things almost look realistic, but not quite. I know I get stuck trying to make something look exactly realistic, and so, oh, hi.
There we go.
So I just really like, it's very inspiring. It's making me want to go home and paint. I don't know. I don't really have a question. I just really like the line work and the way that it's not realistic. It's just, it flows. I don't know. It made me feel something while I'm looking at it. So I really love it.
Thank you. I'm also, yeah, I'm curious to hear or if I can help answer questions about how to integrate art more into the classroom, or yeah, how you're thinking about arts integration in general with education. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that too. Yeah. See, Claudia?
Yes. So have you ever managed to sort of work maybe with the science teacher or math teachers, or have you thought about, because I mean I really like your work and I can see how precisely that, like that bouquet that you showed in the end, you're integrating those books, or even the fact that you're using those found objects in your explanation why. I think it would be really suitable to do things in a science class or even math class, because from nature you can take up patterns and so on.
Yeah,
Do you
no,
have any experience?
yeah, that's a great point. I don't have any experience of science or math, but I did with BRIC, this arts organization that I work for, that I was talking about. I partnered with a social studies middle school teacher, and that's where that Harlem Renaissance project came from, because they were learning about the Great Migration and again the Harlem Renaissance. So that's why I did that project where we were listening to music at that time, looking at artists at that time, and then also looking at artists now, contemporary American artists, specifically Kara Walker, that's responding to the history of slavery and like living through that. So connecting, the past and present. But yeah, I would love to collaborate with. Yeah, I feel like math, and I actually just had to take a math class for my teaching certification. I don't know if you all have had to do that. It was really intense. Oh my goodness. But I do feel like there are similarities in math and art.
Any other questions for Miss Melinda? It's not right on camera either. I see a lot of the, wheels turning, right? Like it was very inspiring. And now you're like, okay. So we were talking about earlier, some of the, I would say, obstacles that you might have to doing art in class, right? And the first one is like, all this information comes at you, and then how do you process that to actually make a piece of art? So that's kind of what I see going on, at least with the undergrads right now, is like, wow, that is so awesome, but what do I do it? So Melinda, what would you say like is an easy first step to start getting into collaging?
I would say get if you have any magazines or newspapers or any trash or anything that you have around you, and maybe set a constraint or a like a limit or assignment, such as like I'm going to make an image with 5 different things, 5 different elements. It could be 5 different colors or symbols, and maybe if it's going to be a self-portrait, have 5 symbols that represent me. So you can give yourself like a visual prompt, like it's going to have 5 things or 5 textures or 5 lines or patterns, but then it's also going to like symbolically communicate maybe a personal thing or maybe a social issue or maybe something about like something you want to teach, perhaps. I would, and also maybe add to, if you want to experiment, like not just using a scissors, but maybe ripping the paper or using all your scraps, or if you cut something out, use the edges, the what is left, the environment around the thing that you cut out. Like if you cut out a house and then you get the rest of the paper around the house, and then you could like play with that too, like the positive and negative. I think that's really cool about collage.
One thing I really liked is the one where you took the photograph and then you did the collage like as a frame. I really thought that was beautiful because you have the art of the photograph, and then you add this second layer of collage, which creates a totally different piece of work. So can you walk us through the steps of how you did that?
Sure. I think I printed the photo out first, and then I made the frame, and I kind of worked like I would say intuitively. I think I glued the objects down around it with Mod Podge. So yeah, it's really really great versatile glue. And then I let that dry, and then I painted over And then I just tried to look at the art, the piece of art, the collage, and just think about, like I would step back and think about if it looks balanced, and even if the colors look even. I'd think about, like I would think about the objects that I was picking, and want them to kind of be there, but not be, but be transformed and all work together. So for example, I think that photo, there's a shell and some flowers, but I wanted them to not be the first thing you saw, so I painted over them. So yeah, my steps were trying to just transform the objects and have them work together as the frame, if that makes sense.
And so how long did that take you on that?
Maybe that was probably a few weeks, but I was working on other things as well. If I sat, that could probably be done in a day, but it was helpful having time to like look at it anew, or take time or work on something else and then go back and look at it. But yeah, I would say probably if I worked on it nonstop, it would probably be about a day.
Other questions, comments? Are we
I
all
was-
on?
Oh, I was just gonna say I really liked the puppet thing that you shared. I thought that was so cool, especially for an English classroom. That idea of like having kids make the puppet, and then they have like a narrative, like they meet these characters that their classmates have made, and then they can write the play that goes with it or the story. I love that idea.
Yeah, I feel like art is really good for, yeah, storytelling and, yeah, building upon something. And yeah, I feel like there's so much, yeah, there's so much you can do with it. Pretty cool.
So Claudia, what ideas, like you kind of asked her about science ed, but what ideas were you getting aside from like patterns and stuff like that? How do you see using collage in the science classroom?
I don't know how to answer that question now, so I would ask her. But I have done a little bit of collage, like having pictures, like of very descriptive of animals or flowers, and sticking them, like from a book, like from an old book, cut out, and then sticking them on drawing, for example. And then, well, there's some patterns, let's say, that they're easy to see. I don't know, like we all see them everywhere. Let's say, think of a fern. That's such a simple, neat thing. And then you can, or for example, let's say of a river basin or something like this, you can see, for example, that some patterns are in more than one environment, and you could use pictures for that, and you can put that together, but then you can emphasize the similarities between these things. And that's important for science because, well, by finding similarities, you can also like take like the most important ideas out of things. So I think that visual is important, and you could use things like what you're doing to sort of emphasize that.
Yeah,
But I don't know.
yeah, that's amazing. I think that's a great idea. I think that's so important, and looking at the similar patterns and forms in the world. I think that's, yeah, an excellent observation. A really good point. I guess I was thinking, just to add, that maybe you could also use, say, like an object like plastic or another made material, and like study the lifeline of it, and be like, where does this come from, or where does it go when it's recycled, or like almost like an artifact from our culture, and maybe make something that way. But yeah, I think what's really cool about science and art is that it really gets at the materiality of things. I actually, from college, I have a bachelor's of science in studio art, because I went to a liberal arts school, and they considered art like such a hands-on studio thing that you get a science degree and rather than an arts degree. Kind of funny.
So, and one thing I appreciate about this collaging and finding stuff is in Oklahoma, we have very small budgets, or if you have a budget at all. So I like the fact that kids can just use whatever they find around. Like you could even go outside and do a treasure hunt to find your objects, and it doesn't cost you anything except for like, you know, the adhesive or whatever you're doing, you put it together with, but that's always one of the hardest things doing arts integration in Oklahoma is because they're like, you know, we're even at the point that as teachers, most of us have to buy our own pencils for our kids. So to get a good quality arts integration, it's important to find something that's like reasonably priced.
Yeah, no, I think that's such an important point. I think that it's really a shame how even people being a professional artist, like there's these expectations of, oh, you know, you need to go to art school or go to, you know, that's its own budget, or you need to have a studio, which is a whole nother thing, and then all the materials and paint. It gets really crazy. And yeah, I think it's just so important for people to be able to kind of just use what they have and not just have to spend. I mean, it's really, it can be really frustrating, but I think that's a really important part of collage for sure.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Yeah, no, we're good. Everybody good? All right. Thank you, Melinda. We really appreciate you having us here. If you want to stay around and do a digital collage of your own, you are free to do that. I know that it's already getting late there. It's already 9:24. My bedtime is 9 o'clock, so I understand if you need to go and do whatever else. But thank you so much for for coming and speaking to us about your work. And it's just really great to see what everybody is doing in the world of art. So thank you so much. All right, so if you have, let me pause this real fast, the record.